everybody. Welcome to Entreprenew, a podcast by M&T Bank. I'm your host, Detra Miller, a Senior Vice President at M&T and a passionate advocate of multicultural and diverse small businesses. I love connecting entrepreneurs with resources and friends to help them succeed. This podcast aims to help entrepreneurs like you take that next step in your business. On each episode, we'll feature a fantastic multicultural and diverse entrepreneur or professional. Join us as we engage, empower, and share knowledge with entrepreneurs along their journey. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to episode 1 of Entreprenew, building a relationship with your banker. In this episode, we'll talk about what a relationship manager is, why this person's important to your business, and how to go about finding one. And we have 2 incredible guests here today to help us with this discussion and tell you about their experience on building a relationship with their banker. We have co-founders of R10 Kitchen, Kat Smith and Kiah Gibian. Welcome, ladies.
Hi.
So good to see you. But before we get into our discussion, I want to take everybody back down memory lane. So you've got a great business idea, your business is off the ground, you have some customers, you're making money. Now you probably have to open up a new account to put the money into, and hopefully that account has your business name on it. And you may be thinking about accessing capital to help you with the growing expenses. And you could also probably benefit from some professionals in your network. Well, a business banking relationship manager can help you with all of those things, getting an account, setting up some capital for your growing expenses, and also introducing you to some really great people that can help you with the day-to-day management of your business. And so I would love to welcome our 2 incredible guests now who are doing some amazing work in their industry. So Kat Smith and Kiah Gibian, again, thank you so much for joining us for our very first episode. I'm so excited to have you all here today and to share all of your beautiful gems with our audience. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to start with you, Kat. My understanding is, and I've had the pleasure of watching you ladies over the last few years, but you're doing some really incredible work with underrepresented individuals in the food industry. So I'd love for you to kick us off and talk about your business and how you're making an impact with your work.
So R10 Kitchen is a commissary kitchen that Kiah and I dreamt of about 3 years ago in the midst of the pandemic. Both of us being chefs, being in the industry for combined 25 plus years. We decided we wanted to do this thing and we wanted to benefit folks that look like us. So we created this commissary kitchen and then we thought about the business model, how it would actually operate and what food industry folks actually needed. And what it is an affordable space and several different ways for them to be able to make capital while in that space. So we do that here at R10 Kitchen. We have the commercial kitchen itself where people can cook, do their business, catering folks, people that are tapping into third-party delivery services. Then we have people that want to do pop-ups. So we have a pop-up window. We have a flexible retail space where people can host things, as well as the courtyard and Kiah's food truck where they can make money. So this place is like an all be all.
Yes. It really is. I love the variety that you all have, the many options, because it is very hard for a lot of people that are in the food industry. So I love that you just give people lots of options to be able to be successful in their business. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And the space is beautiful. So hopefully all of our viewers today will really take some time to come out and visit your space. And if they're not local, hopefully at least check out your website. So Kiah, I'm going to switch over to you. So I know I've had an opportunity to know about the experience and a little bit about your journey, but can you really talk to us about how you were able to build the connection with your banker? How did you even get started in finding the banker that helps you all on this journey?
Yeah, so when I was starting my food truck in 2016, I was looking for a bank that would be personable, kind of in a smaller, more customer service oriented bank. So I got started with M&T when I started my first business. And from there, when Kat and I were getting ready, we knew that we were going to need to ask for a loan in order to make the improvements on the building to be able to bring this kitchen to life. And so we were doing some research and we learned that M&T Bank had a small minority business banking team. And that really spoke to us. We knew that it would kind of be an uphill battle with requesting a loan, as just in the sense that traditionally banks are not lending as frequently to smaller minority owned businesses, especially with the amount of capital that we were requesting and with the lack of capital that we were bringing to the page or to the forefront. And so we ended up connecting with M&T, getting connected with you, Detra, and also another bank manager, and we're able to kind of have that team throughout the whole process of signing the loan, getting through the construction phase of it, and just navigating each draw with throughout the process. So it was phenomenally huge because we both were I don't know what the right word is, nervous or like intimidated, I guess, by the banking system, just with like the historical challenges of navigating acquiring capital. And so having somebody on the inside that was actually able to kind of like translate and help navigate and also like reiterate our needs, because there were several points where we would get into, not several points, but there were moments where we would be facing like the traditional model of the bank loan, and we would have to be like, okay, like actually for the two of us and the way that this business is going, and me being the general contractor, and there being like non-traditional ways that we were handling the loan money, this like one component of like the checks and balance system doesn't really make sense for us, or something along those lines. And so having somebody on the other side in the bank be like kind of vouching for us and just being like, just being like the kind of like giving us additional credit to the process. And that was huge. Yeah.
No, that's incredible. And I know it can be a very intimidating process. So, good for you all for just kind of stepping out and knowing that you wanted to be very intentional about who helped you, or who was going to be helping you as you were moving forward with this amazing idea that you all have. And now it's so beautiful to see all those thoughts and ideas come to fruition. So I'm just so grateful that you all reached out, and we had an opportunity to really help you through the brainchild that you originally had.
And I think like something that we were reminded of in making this decision and doing this getting started in this loan process was that it's a partnership. Like for us to succeed, it also is a win for the bank. Yeah. And so it kind of like just having somebody on our side oriented it in a way where it's like, okay, like it's not us versus them in this situation. Like we really we want to succeed and they want us to succeed. And that kind of became more clear in the partnership.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I love a lot of things that you just talked about. So really, some people ask the question, like, what is a relationship manager? What is that person's role? And how I always try to say it is this person is really a connector. And they're a person that you should be able to rely on to ask questions and allow yourself to be very vulnerable with. Their job should be reaching out a couple times a year at least. Sometimes business owners are extremely busy. So I know you don't have the time to talk to a banker, every day. But we typically say a business banker should be meeting with their clients at least quarterly to have conversations about updates on where they are, to make sure their goals are aligning with what we had talked about in terms of bank products and services, and also just being out there in the community. I think a really good banker to help bring down those walls that you were talking about, particularly with communities of diverse backgrounds. Like in order to have someone really trust you, you have to be seen, and it's got to be a consistent showing up, because that's the only way that you're really going to get people to trust you. So I think the role of a banker is so much more than what people realize, that it really can make or break a person's business. So I love that you all were able to build that great relationship to where you could feel like you could be yourselves and ask questions that maybe you wouldn't necessarily open up and ask for someone, the traditional, mindset of what a banker is. Kat, I'm going to switch back over to you because I know Kiah mentioned a couple of things around it was going to be an uphill battle going through the process. What are the things that you can remember as you were getting started with your banker and trying to go through some of those challenges? What do you think particularly, like what are some things that your banker truly was able to help you with that maybe you weren't even aware of prior to building that great relationship?
I think with our banker, it was really easy to be transparent, and going into getting a business loan, you first have to have your personal finances kind of in order. And so just like the lack of judgment and just like the championing of you trying to get your stuff in order so you can get this loan that you need was there. So that was really nice because I struggled on my end with my credit. And I was just like stressed out about it, that was going to hinder us from getting our loan. And your team was there for us. And that was really nice. I know we would text all the time. So just having that ability to like text her direct line was really cool. Like, hey, we don't understand this, or we need help with that, or we're trying to get this. Can you work it for us quickly so we can get the draw faster? It was really nice to have just like that quick access. Didn't feel like we had to go all the way around the mulberry bush to get what we needed.
Awesome. Yeah, access is so important. And many times, especially in your situation, and probably the same for a lot of business owners, time is really important, right? Like many things couldn't happen if something else wasn't done. So being able to keep things on track was really, really important during that process. And also like one of the things I've been reflecting on really was around just the pandemic, right? And I think that was a big eye opener for a lot of people on just how important having a relationship with the banker is, right? When so many people were struggling, nobody knew what was happening when the world shut down. Many folks had to look to access the Paycheck Protection Program to help get money into their business so that they can continue to stay in operation. And sadly, many businesses went out of operation because they didn't have the influx of cash, but they were waiting for people to be able to come back and visit their establishments or until they had an opportunity to pivot their business model. And that was a really sad time because, as we were talking about earlier, around diverse communities, because of the lack of strong relationship, many diverse businesses, women, people of color, and entrepreneurship were left out of that process of getting access to capital through a government-run program, right? But the banks were the way that people accessed this money. So it just really emphasized and highlighted for so many people just how important building a strong relationship is. And so I think what would be really helpful is for us to maybe come together and provide some tips on how to go about building these strong relationships. So, as from a banker side, and what I always try to tell people, we mentioned a couple of times being vulnerable. Well, in order to be vulnerable, you have to build a nice relationship, right? So being able to know that you are just as much in control of the relationship as we think a bank would be, right? So being very picky. I always equate it to dating, sort of. So you get to pick and choose who you want to spend your time with. And if you're getting that feeling that person just isn't right, it's okay to look around, right? To continue having conversations. And one other thing I would say is people in your industry, if they've had a lot of success with a banker, is asking questions of them, like, do you know a strong banker that can help me and that would allow me to be on this journey, and really be more of a consultative approach. That would be honest.
We were like, we wanted somebody that's worked in like food or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. What other tips do you ladies have?
Just with like specifically a renovation as big as ours.
Yeah.
Especially because throughout the process, all of like with it being during the pandemic, there was inflation on all of the materials. And so we really needed there to be context to like what we were actually building.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was cool to just be humanized in this thing. It wasn't just like, oh, these people are asking for money and they're doing this thing. It was like having buy into our story and believing in our mission and what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I think bringing empathy to banking, right? Like it's not somebody behind a computer, right? These are real people. And how do we get them to understand your story, right? So us as bankers being in front of the computer, right? Having those conversations beyond the community. And how do we relay the information back for someone that's applying for a loan? How do we make sure that it doesn't become this elusive process that people don't understand? So I think that's really important. Any other tips that you all have for our audience members who are looking for ways to build strong relationships with the bank and a banker?
I think be honest with yourself about how expensive the project is going to be, and creating realistic buffers around things that will change. I think that something that we did when we were getting into the process is because we were so intimidated by the process, we really downplayed how big a project we were taking on. And as a result, we really didn't ask for the right amount of starting capital in terms of what was left over after the renovation to starting our business. And I think that, I think being new to banking and having like starting this relationship, it really like throughout the process, we warmed up to the fact that it's like, okay, you're going to see like our taxes, our like personal,
very intimate, right?
You're gonna, like we're going to get to know you're not going to like skim around where you're at. And so just being really realistic about where you're at, not letting that be a factor in how you communicate about what your needs are, and allowing your passion and your story to come through to really advocate. And that's the thing is like, when you're presenting yourself to request a loan, you're really having to advocate for the finished product, which is uncertain. And so it's kind of hard to be like really gung-ho about something that doesn't exist yet. And so I think just, being able to have somebody on the other side that's like, okay, like this is an idea that can work, and let's figure out how to make it work and what you need.
Exactly. And I think it's so important, you kind of making that statement just around storytelling, right? So you have to be able to tell the story. And the way that we do that is you have to kind of get everything out on the table, even if it doesn't feel so good, right? Many of us want to always present the best version of ourselves, but reality is everybody has something. So the more that we can get ahead of maybe whatever obstacles may be coming up, whatever it may be, being able to have those out on the table initially, it allows the bank or the banker, I would say, to be able to tell the story and really help to mitigate against whatever risk may come up. So that vulnerability piece is really so important, and not selling yourself too short, right? And being able to say like, hey, this is what was happening. Let's put this all out on the table and let's work together to think through how we might overcome some of these obstacles. And Kiah, I feel like I kind of cut you off there. Is there something else that you want to say?
I was like, I was about to say, having somebody that gives it to you straight, like, hey, look at our project. Like, this is how much you truly need. Like, ask for this amount, or a person that's just like, if you feel like, trust your gut, I should say, when you're like picking your banker. Do you feel like they're truly advocating, have your best interest at heart? Or are they just like trying to just get you whatever you can get and just move on to the next person? So I didn't feel like that in this instance.
Yeah, I think like having mentors that the bank has already worked with that parallel what you're doing is a big part of it. That was something, we were doing something that was so new that we didn't really have folks that we could tap into that had already done it, to be like, realistically, like, what were your numbers in this situation and that sort of thing. I also think like a component of capitalism is perfectionism. And so like, especially as a new business, I like creating like the marketing approach and kind of the facade of what it is you're creating. I mean, I think a lot of people want to present themselves as already succeeding.
I agree.
Started. And we did a very vulnerable process with our telling of the story, because we kind of were sharing our story before we were open. But even in doing that, we still had to, there were still components to the process that we were going through that we were like, this is actually like, we're not going to get into the details of like how grueling the permitting process was, or like, the subcontractors that maybe didn't work out.
I think also it's really, really important for people to get started before they even have a lending need. Because then it makes things so much easier. If you could start making that relationship ahead of time, then it's not like drinking from a fire hose and we've got to get all these things together as you build the relationship. And then this person might even say, hey, like, your business is really growing and you guys are paying a lot of things out of pocket. You probably should really think about capital, or we should think about some cash management products and services to really help you with the management of the business. And it may not even need to be capital. So I think that's one thing I'd like for people to remember as well, is just to, really focus on building that relationship before you even have some sort of capital.
Yeah. And I think, that for minority owned businesses that aren't starting with capital, there's like really the crowdsourcing of information is really like bootstrapping it from the beginning, like starting with what you have, having labor be a huge part of how you make it through to making capital. And kind of this intimidation factor of like, you shouldn't go into debt to create something because that's too vulnerable.
Right.
And the reality is that like we got to a point where we were like, we can't take our ideas to the next level without risk.
Yes.
And that really is what the relationship with the bank is. It's like you're taking a risk. And so you want to feel comfortable in that partnership around taking that risk. And vice versa. The bank wants to feel, comfortable in your idea and what you're doing. And so there is just that preemptive conversation where you're really building trust around going for an idea that's bigger than what you have.
Agreed. Yep. And so our job is to make everyone feel comfortable and thinking bigger and knowing that there are other options out there. You don't have to be on this journey alone. You don't have to bootstrap. So my hope and my goal is, especially for women and people of color that are tuning into the podcast, that's what we really have decided to start this for, is so we can bring those walls down, bring the barriers down. And, it's just hopefully you're making a new friend that can be there with you for the good, bad, and the ugly, and do it all together. So any other thoughts that you ladies have before we decide to tell everybody goodbye today? None?
I don't think so. I just know that like once you get your business started, make sure all your ducks are in a row, proving that you're actually making money, because we are going to be asking for some more money.
Yeah, it is. It is a good point. I think like with us, with property ownership and business ownership, they're structurally, like once we opened, we realized that we wanted money to be flowing in a different way to account for what was actually happening. I think that was like a step we didn't really think about until we were in the process of transactions. And so having that forethought of like, okay, what are your other phases? Do you need finance for the other phases? And what do you need your finances to look like in order to achieve those additional phases?
Exactly. And that's where, with us being bankers and the network that we have, right, we talked a lot about financial capital, but we didn't talk a whole lot about social capital. So with things like that, you may need a CPA or a bookkeeper or someone else that can really help guide through how to make those numbers, look the way that you need them to, right? How to really make sure things are organized so that it does continue to help tell the story for the business, what you've done so far, and then projections, what that's going to look like in the future. So.
And that was advice that was given to us by our banker, was like, this is how, like, we early on realized that the capital that we had gotten through our loan wasn't going to cover the full project. Right. And so early on, we were getting coaching that was like, this is how you'll want the first year to be before you ask for this next step. And that was like huge. It rerouted how we were structuring our company and how we were operating in terms of like finances and what we were investing in and what we were saving. That sort of thing.
And other accounts that we had to open.
Yep. That's great. Yep. So it's a whole process. It's so much more than what people think it is. So I'm so happy that you could share all the great information that you did share today. And hopefully it provides people with confidence to go out and be confident in who they get as their banker. You are in control of asking the questions and making sure you have the right fit for you. So how can people follow the two of you and the amazing work that you are doing with Our Time Kitchen?
We're at Our Time Kitchen on all platforms. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Our website is www.ourtimekitchen.com, and we're located at 117 West 24th Street in the Old Goucher neighborhood in Baltimore.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And everybody, please go and visit Our Time Kitchen. They are just doing such amazing work. And Hopefully you were able to see that through their presentation today. And please join us for future episodes of Entreprenew. We're here to provide you with some really great content to help you with your businesses, and we're on all social channels. So be on the lookout for our next episodes. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.